Alrighty boys, so we got the truck up on the jack stands and I got the transmission out. We got it sitting right here. I got some of the pump bolts out, 2 of them are in there just so it doesn't like fall off while I'm working on the oil pan. This is going to be hard to see, but as I said in the last video, I think it was leaking from the bolt heads on the transmission. There's a little rubber seal on there and some of these are kind of damaged. Some of them are okay, some of them are beat up. So when I put them back on, I'm gonna just RTV the bolts. I think that's a pretty common practice normally. I've never had an issue with it before. This is the first time I've ever had one leak like that. So I will, from now on, RTV the head bolts. I'm also gonna pull the pump out and I'm gonna realign the pump halves. I don't know if that's contributing to it, but just to be safe, I did end up buying a pump tool like to align the halves. I've never used one of these before, but this was like 17 bucks. So this just goes around the 2 pump halves, clamp it together, aligns it, and then you can tighten the bolts. I normally just eyeball it and line them up, but just to completely eliminate that being a variable, I got the tool and we'll do it that way. But while I got the transmission out, I have this idea that I want to try, and I'm going to do it on this transmission, whether it's good or bad, and we'll see how it goes. So I would like to build like a level filled drain bung into the pan. So we have the drain plug here, but that's right over the top of the valve body. And when I used to have an Explorer, I did some transmission work on that, and they actually have like a calibrated drain plug on the pan on those things. And the drain plug is actually something similar to this. This is the rear cooler line fitting, but it's actually something pretty similar to this, where it has a tube that goes up into the pan to the proper drain level, and then you just pull the plug out of the bottom, and then if it's overfilled, you just pull the plug out of the bottom, and then it'll like gravity drain out of the top hole to the proper level while it's running, and then it's pretty easy to fill it to the proper level. So it's not really that difficult to check it and fill it to the proper level. The issue you can have with these low-car dipsticks is the level is not accurate. So there you can see the fill line right by my fingernail, and it's actually about 3/8 of an inch below the mating surface of the case. So that's actually like a couple quarts low or a few quarts low. You want the fluid level to be like a 1/4 inch above this mating surface, so the pan is basically completely submerged. So what can end up happening with these expensive, fancy dipsticks is people will fill it, and they'll fill it to the fill level, and they'll be like 3 quarts low on fluid, and then burn up the transmission. So what you can do to calibrate these things is just mark a line on it where you need to. But kind of what I was doing with this one was I would just put it in this far where it catches like this, and then that puts the fill level probably like 3/8 of an inch above the case line. So that was just kind of a quick way to do it without putting a mark on there, to know that I at least had it guaranteed full. But what I want to do is actually weld a fitting into the oil pan that's going to go like right in this pocket right here. So this pocket has enough area to put a small tube in there where I can calibrate it right to the exact spot that I need. So I plan to use this old transmission cooler fitting that was leaking. So I put it on the lathe and then I smoothed out all the threads. So what I'm going to use is this steel tube. I'll weld it together, and then I'll be able to cut this tube at the right length and calibrate the length of this tube. So then essentially what will happen is this tube will stick up about a 1/4 inch above this pan mating surface, and that'll give me like a perfect fill level. So then I'll just use a 6AN cap on this side. This will be sticking out of the pan here. It's actually going to be in the back, so it'll be on the raised up section, so it won't be below the bottom of the pan. It'll be up here somewhere, and then all I'll have to do is put fluid in it. Then I can run it technically with the cap off and the bottom of this open. I can pull it off, and then I can fill it until fluid starts to come out of that hole. And then when fluid stops coming out of that hole, I know it'll be full to the right level. I can verify it with the dipstick, and it'll be a really easy way to drain it if I overfill it. Because if you put in like 1 or 2 quarts extra and you know it's high on the dipstick, then you got to pull the drain plug off, and you don't really have a good way to drain it out slowly and kind of calibrate where you need to be. So I'm going to get started on building this thing, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is just kind of mark where I want this hole to be. So I think I got good placement. I'll probably go like here-ish. I'm going to drill that out quick, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, so what I did here was take a straight edge across the pan surface, and then I marked a 1/4 inch up from the gasket. Welded that tube onto the fitting, and now we're a 1/4 inch. You can see that it's right where it needs to be, right above the gasket. Now I'll just go ahead and weld it onto the pan. Alright, so I'm just doing a quick test fit here on the pan. So I have a line marked where I think I want to weld it, and I'm just going to make sure it's centered. So I'm just going to rock it in each direction and make sure it's not like rubbing on anything, hitting anything. Feels like it's okay. So it doesn't hit anything in either direction. It's not rubbing on anything. So I should be able to weld it on that spot. Okay, so there it is. I welded it inside and outside. Sticks about a 1/4 inch above the pan level. And that's what it looks like actually on the transmission. So you can see it's well below the bottom section of it. Doesn't stick down at all. So if I lift the pan up, you can see right where that tube comes down. Doesn't hit anything, doesn't interfere with anything. So it should actually work pretty slick, I think. I'll still calibrate the dipstick and then I'll be able to check it that way or verify it that way. But part of the problem sometimes can be with those sticks, you're pulling the thing in and out multiple times and then it actually pulls fluid up the tube, so then it's kind of got stuff all over it and can be a little hard to read. So it'll be kind of interesting to check that, run it, get it warm, and then while it's running, pull that little cap off, let it drain out to where it would be like the calibrated level, and then double check the dipstick. So you only have to pull the dipstick out once to check it, and then eventually you could probably just get comfortable filling it that way, like overfill it by a 1/2 quart or whatever, and then just pull the thing off till it stops draining, and then you're good. All right, and the pump is kind of shifted a little bit, so it's not perfect. I'll try to find a spot. It'll be hard to see on camera, but you can see there's a little bit of a lip right here, where if I spin the pump around 180, that lip is sticking out the opposite direction. So it's just slight, it's not terrible, but the pump was actually pretty hard to get out, and for just installing it not too long ago, it shouldn't have been that hard to get out. So when I was trying to pull it out, I kind of felt like it was probably offset a little bit, so I'll use that band, get everything tightened up real good, and put it back together, RTV the bolts, and then we'll get this thing back in the truck. You can also kind of see some wear marks on the case where it's a little bit offset. Or like on the sides, you don't really have those marks, but on the top and bottom, you do. So then that'll also take the rubber seal and push it off center inside the case hole. So it was probably a combination of bleeding through this gasket here and the pump bolts. All right, a little bit hard to see on the camera, but it's perfectly aligned all the way around now with the band. So I just took the rubber seal off, tightened it with the band, then tightened all the bolts down. So I'll go ahead and throw this thing back in, throw some RTV on, get the pan on, then we should be good. I'm waiting on the 6AN cap for the pan, so I won't do the filling yet. That thing should be here tomorrow or the next day, and then I'll fill it and then we can go drive it again. All right, and I did go ahead and take a file and put a nice little line on both sides of the dipstick there. It is low right now, but my plan is not to check it with the stick all the way in, that I would check it when it stops like this. So that's how I was doing it before. So when it stops like that, that file mark is about a 1/4 inch above the case mark, or above the case sealing area. So that should be pretty good. The pump went in kind of weird, so I don't know if it's because I have the pump saver plate in there, but the pump almost seemed like it bottomed out without any resistance from the seal. So I put a new seal on there. It had a new seal, but I put another new seal on it, and it seemed like it went in a little bit better. The other one, I could put the pump in all the way down, it would rest, and then I pushed on these little nubs and it could actually spin in there. Usually the seal is enough to like tighten it against the case where you can't spin it and it's snug in there, but that pump saver plate does push the face of the pump out a little bit farther than normal. Not by much, but maybe it's good now that the halves are completely centered, and that might have been the majority of the leak. If it's that much more sensitive now because of the pump saver plate and it was slightly misaligned, that it would end up leaking. But I did put RTV on all the bolt heads, or right stuff on all the heads. Make sure I put my lockup O-ring back on, and then we'll be good. I was just thinking too, if you wanted to, you could take like an AN to barb fitting, because the Ford fitting, it's a drain fill plug. So the way that you fill it is actually through that same drain hole. So you take the center plug piece out of it, you thread a little barb on there, then you actually pump the fluid into the transmission, and then when you're done pumping the fluid in, you take it off, and then if it drains, you know you overfilled it. If it doesn't drain, then you got to put more in. So you could do something like this with a hose barb or some kind of a fitting, put this thing on the side. You could stand way on the side of the vehicle with a funnel and just dump it right in there and fill it, and then go down and take this thing off if you didn't want to fight with trying to pour fluid in your engine bay. Sometimes it can be kind of a crappy fit with the way the dipstick is like so close to the firewall. You need like a long funnel or whatever, and you don't want to worry about leaning over the engine bay, pouring fluid on the manifolds and stuff. So just a thought, we'll see how it goes. Mine was actually pretty easy to fill from right here because there's not really a whole lot in there, and then I had the low car funnel adapter, so that worked out pretty decent. So I might not have to worry about that, but it's something you could do.